Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional manager, author from India, Mr. Vivek Gaurav. Vivek, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ashutosh. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. It's really been a pleasure with you, working towards as a build-up of this conversation. And I'm really happy to be here with you on the final day.
Thank you. Vivek is the Director of Operations of Cipla Health Limited. He's an author of a book titled Life is a Wordplay, Go Win. And in his own words, he likes to call himself a failed entrepreneur. He's a content creator and he's a very, very tall supply chain leader. So let's start with why you refer to yourself as a failed entrepreneur.
Okay, that's an interesting question to start with. So me and my wife started this company around 2014 in Bombay. We were in Bombay's first premium gourmet salad startup. So my book has an interesting quote which I penned down a few years ago during my startup date itself, that says, I had been fortunate enough to have had many successful failures, but very few failed successes. Okay. So as a result, I very proudly don my failure badge because I think those 2.5 years of my startup stint, they, left me with a plethora of learnings for life, which I'm still using and, to my advantage, I would say. Secondly, calling myself failure openly also, I believe, keeps me grounded. And that's very important for an individual in life, and keeps him away from distraction. And that's just working with me. So I've been openly flaunting this badge of calling myself as a successfully failed entrepreneur, I would say that.
Right. Wonderful. And you just mentioned that there were a lot of learnings.
Yeah.
Why don't you share with me 2 or 3 of your top learnings?
So Ashutosh, I think, that was a game changer for me personally. Those 2 years of entrepreneurial venture, right? I think the biggest underlying learning is that it brought a strong, enterprising, entrepreneurial approach towards life and work both. Okay. If I would like to put it in one phrase, it would be, it further instilled with me, the value of ownership without boundary. That's very important, right? We are either very ownership oriented, but we encircle ourselves with boundaries. But I think when you are running a startup and you have had yourself been a very successful entrepreneur, you are neither an HR guy, nor a supply chain guy, nor a finance guy. You're a one-man army, and you believe complete boundaryless working. I think that's what has been my biggest learning. Number 2, the sheer conviction of getting things done. As I always remember somebody telling me that an entrepreneur cannot take no as an answer, right? So whether it's walking midway and meeting somebody in between, finding a solution somehow, I think my level of conviction and my level of getting things done in my professional life has taken a step up as a result of my experience. And the last one would be, so I have been a factory guy, in the beginning of my career. So I always considered myself as a problem solver anyways by getting my hands dirty. Okay. But what entrepreneurship, taught me was how to become a problem solver, even for the high-end business kind of problems, right? So I think I gradually developed that knack by working closely with people, by not getting your ego into it, for example, or your other jazz around it, and just keep focusing on solving problems one at a time. I think these are the 3 big learnings I have taken away and very selfishly deployed in my life.
Wonderful. So Vivek, I'm always very, very partial to authors because I always believe that anyone who's willing to put his thoughts down in a book and put it out in public domain and be open to criticism is a very courageous individual.
Oh.
You've written a book titled Life is a Wordplay, Go Win. Tell me about this book.
So I always call myself an author by accident. So hence I'm not even an author, to be very frank, So this book is actually, which came out a couple of years ago. It is a humble attempt from my side, from a next door author, to inspire my readers to be winners at life. by trying to provide them a different perspective of looking at life. Right. So what I've tried to do, Ashutosh, here is I have a collection of my own and original quotations, one-liners, punchlines. They are all observations on life. They are all satires on life, on various aspects of life, like work life, married life, behavior, change management, a metro life, how a typical commuter feels in in a city like Bombay. So I've tried to provide this lens to my readers through which when they look at their life, they find it very interesting and they want to take it very lightly, take it life in its own stride, wittingly, but at the same time, take away the deep undertone that quote stands for. For example, you will, so I've tried to use wordplay and wit to drive home my point. It's not like a typical a motivational book which has paragraphs, for example. It's a simple punchline. On the onset, you might end up passing through a few pages in 2 minutes. But if you stop by, think over a quotation, you will find that it's very deeply connected. And the interesting thing is, every individual whom I spoke to, every reader whom I spoke to, even if it's a single quote, every individual has tried to look at his own life through that quote. Correct. And they have interpreted it in its own way. That even I didn't foresee when I was penning down that, to be very frank. So I think this is all I tried to achieve through my book. And, it was an experiment, I would say. I generally like expressing myself. So book, I think, was only one way to just express myself, nothing else. So I think a couple of quotations, I'll give you an example. For example, one of my most loved quotes, which I got a lot of feedback on, positive feedback, was, I would like to sleep over an issue instead of losing sleep over an issue. Okay. Right. So I'm trying to say to the people that it's okay sometimes not to solve things immediately. It's okay sometimes to relax, sleep over it. Time will take its own course sometimes, instant gratification may not be applicable all the time. Another one, which is my personal favorite, is, life is a party. The problem starts when you start expecting return gifts. Right? So this is entire ties from a point of expectations. I always believe that expectations generally lead to disappointment, right? But there is still a difference between having an expectation and having an aspiration. Okay, right. So this is how I would summarize my book, Ashutosh.
Fascinating. And this book is available on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon, Flipkart. In fact, it's available worldwide, right? On Amazon.com.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So my next question to you is about your journey as a public speaker on life and happiness. Tell me about what you speak about, and maybe give me an example of the audience reaction.
Okay. So again, when I published my book, I made it a point to connect with most of my readers individually and personally, to understand whether it actually made any sense to them or not, to be very frank. And to my pleasant surprise, most of the people really appreciated the way I expressed myself about life and how they were able to, take advantage of that expression for themselves. Okay. So what I then concluded, Ashutosh, was that I can, through my own observations about life, I'm not a very, I've just spent 40 years on the earth, but they're still sufficient to have few observations about life. Correct. Okay. So what I thought to myself that if I'm good at articulating well, and if people have correlated to what I've said, the natural progression of this initiative would be, try public speaking and have a dialogue now with people. Okay. And, I don't speak about motivation. I don't speak about mind management or stress management. My talk is just about how to approach life. It's very simple, plain vanilla, simple approach. Because I think that is where each of us are struggling. Most of us are struggling, right? Even a small instance like, two friends didn't speak to each other properly for a minute keeps you disturbed for 5 hours, right? I'm talking about that small instance in your life. And how do we approach life so that we can just keep ticking off these things from your life and start feeling much more at ease and much more in control of your life is my entire motive. In fact, to my pleasant chance, this pandemic, quite a few people, they personally approached me and spoke to me. Okay. So I realized that, while public speaking is one area, some people found comfortable to pick up a phone and call me. And some of them were calling me for the first time ever in life, right? And say, this is a pandemic situation, work-life balance, this, that, how do I? So there are many questions around that. And every time somebody shares an experience or a problem, I suddenly realized that this aspect of human thought process, I never realized that is going to be is going to be happening in somebody's mind. No, so to me also, it every time it opens a new set of topics to research on. Okay. So I think so. So the response has been very good. But due to pandemic, I have not been able to pursue it very seriously because I don't like taking such sessions online because I mean it's very plain vanilla if you're not in front of people in person while talking about this sensitive issue, right? You need to be alive in front of people without any disturbance. I think that's where now I'm planning to start it again. Big Bang. I started with a couple of MB schools, and got a very good interaction sessions with some of the budding leaders of future. So I think that's where I am on my journey of public speaking, Ashutosh.
Wonderful. So, when you look at yourself, you're an author, a public speaker, a content creator, a photography enthusiast, a food blogger. How do you manage to find time for such diverse interests in addition to your day job, as you would call it, as a supply chain leader?
See, I think if I look back, Ashutosh, around 7-8 years ago, I was like many other people. In terms of having huge expectations from my job or career. Okay. Hence, the level of stress or the level of dissatisfaction was pretty high. Okay. And I realized, and I was speaking to many people, I realized that, sometimes you keep blaming on your job or people around you or whatever, you know what I'm saying, correct? But while I realized that, this condition of mind has always been there, irrespective of which job or which company I am. So, which means it's nothing to do with outside, something to do with inside. Okay, that was my first, trigger moment. Then what I realized was, around 7-8 years ago again, that if I try to create a parallel universe for myself in terms of developing few passions and try to draw satisfaction and happiness from it. Now, what it does is, I thought so, and it has done that for me. Because I have a parallel universe now of all these passions which you spoke about. As a result, I draw a lot of satisfaction, a lot of contentment from that. Okay. As a result, my degree of expectations from my work has gone down. Okay, and it's very natural. When your degree of expectations go down, your degree of happiness goes up. Okay, so I don't no more look forward to my work and put burden on my work to give me all happiness in life, because it can't be possible anyways. Okay, right? So I always say that hobbies anyways are serious work. Hobbies is just not a hobby; it's a very serious work. And now that I have found importance about it, since it's become a passion. It's become very critical to me. So of course I will have to find time now. Now, of course, since everybody has same amount of time in a day, you have to compromise on a few things. I don't watch movies. I don't watch TV. I don't go for a holiday travel for more than 2 days. So, I have adjusted my life accordingly, because this is giving much more, enrichment than any other thing. So I think maybe that's why I'm able to pull it off. And I always speak to people that, you should develop very, very serious hobbies around you. It's very important. Otherwise, you are trying to put all your mental eggs in one basket, which is your job or a career.
Wonderful. So, Vivek, I'm now going to move to your specialization, your area of work.
Sure.
I have a few questions for you on supply chains.
Sure.
From factory executive to chief supply chain officer, how has the function evolved over the last few decades?
Okay. See, I think if I would like to summarize in one sentence, the supply chain function has moved from being a little corner in a commercial, as a part of a commercial function somewhere in the company, to boardroom.
Right.
Okay. I think that's for me has been the biggest, the most enriching way I have been looking at supply chain. I've spent 16 years, not more than that. So I have no memory of supply chain before that. Okay. I was a fresher always before that. So in the last 16 years, this is how I have seen. Okay. Even as we speak today, there's still a spectrum of companies where still a supply chain would be sitting in one corner in a commercial function. But there are many companies where it's sitting in the boardroom. If I put it in a slightly elaborative manner, from being called a service function, from being treated itself as a service function, to being an enabler, Two, being an USP of a business.
Mm.
Let's talk about e-commerce, right? E-commerce supply chain is a USP of the business.
Mm.
You are creating value by delivering somebody in one day. You are arranging a stock pickup bag from a return item in one day. Who is doing this? Supply chain is doing it. Of course, supported with technology, right? Interestingly, but unfortunately, this entire event of COVID-19, it has brought the conversation of supply chain and logistics to the living rooms of the people.
Correct.
My parents have never heard of supply chain logistics in a way how I understand it, right? For example, when the world started seeing impact on essentials, medicines, labor movement, I think supply chain became a household, a parlance or a jargon.
Correct.
So this is how I've seen supply chain evolve as a function, Ashutosh. And believe me, it was long overdue.
Absolutely. And over the last few years, there has been a plethora of e-commerce platforms led by the two big guys, Amazon and Flipkart. How have these e-commerce platforms disrupted supply chains?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, e-commerce is one of those businesses where supply chain is a USP. Okay, it's not a subsidiary function, it's not a support function, right? It is a USP, it is a business enabler, it's a differentiator.
Correct.
Okay, as a result, e-commerce has given birth to a whole new breed of supply chain professionals who think differently, who understand the huge potential of supply chain through technology and through scale. Such a unprecedented scale a traditional supply chain guy would have not imagined a few years ago. Right. Another thing, I think the very skill set required to run a supply chain is undergoing massive change because of e-commerce. They have set the bar very high. Okay. Right. And adaptability, flexibility has undergone a very different paradigm shift as a meaning. Okay. Another point, which whenever I think of e-commerce, three things come to my mind. There are three aspects of supply chain which I generally thought to myself. Cost, speed, and reach. Okay. Now, what e-commerce has done, it has replaced the concept of cost, which I anyways hate in person, if you ask me, to value. Okay. Now, if you're able to deliver a package in one day, but spend 1.5 times cost, it's okay for the e-commerce company because you are creating value. So a traditional supply chain guy would say it's 1.5 times cost, but an e-commerce guy would say it's a value which my supply chain guy is creating for me by delivering it in half a day. Okay. So that's where the value of cost has got replaced by value. Second is, when I say speed, e-commerce has replaced it with agility. Because speed is generally one way. I'm an engineer. Velocity is one way, right? But agility would mean, how fast you can reroute a package to ensure customer service, how fast you can pick up a reverse logistics from a customer's this thing, right? So I think this entire definition of supply chain has undergone change through e-commerce. Now the supply chain reach is just counted with pin codes. Correct. Okay. Right. And, it's crazy. So this is how I see, e-commerce. A last point would be people like me who are sitting pretty in the backend of in a backend office, so-called, or corporate office. E-commerce has exposed all of us to the front end or the consumer. I remember I was a part of core team when I was at Kaya Skin Clinics, and we set up e-commerce business for Kaya Skin Clinics. Okay, I was surprised when I suddenly got a couple of calls on a Sunday from directly customers that my package has not reached. Wow. Okay, that was for the first time. I didn't know even how to handle a call. Okay, so this is what supply chain e-commerce has done to supply chain.
Fascinating. And as far as technology is concerned, how has technology changed supply chains? Because from changing the entire concept from cost to value, as you have just said, technology has played a very significant role.
Of course.
I'd love to get your perspective on that.
See, my biggest my biggest qualm, first of all, when it comes to technology, is that in most of the companies, it's still at the jargon level. Okay, we are talking very good. In many companies, but still there's a long way to go to actually adapting and adopting. Okay, but at the same time, there are those companies who are maybe new kids on the block, or they have adapted themselves very well, that they are able to boast about the benefits which technology has brought on the table by sheer quick implementation, and upskilling and reskilling of their supply chains. Correct. Okay, so there is still very strong dichotomy existing on technology in the country as well as in the world. Okay, That's one. That's my first perspective.
Okay.
And when we can figure out on what or what point of that spectrum we all are sitting at. Each company is sitting at.
Fair enough.
I think the second part is, of course, it has opened up a new way of thinking. Okay, whether it's blockchain, whether it's Internet of Things, whether it's simply real-time demand tracking, a very simple order automation process. Okay, it can, again, technology also has its own spectrum. I think the only thing which would, according to me, help the organizations to adopt this technology better would be when this entire technology initiative is led by the CEO of the company and not the supply chain. Okay, because it has to come. I always say supply chain has to be ahead of business.
Correct.
Because you know what, for example, it's a very raw example. You can achieve 2x a sale maybe in the last 3 days of the month, but you cannot produce 2x product in the last 3 days of the month.
Correct.
You cannot move 2x product in the last 3 days of the month. Okay. It's a very raw, simple, old age thought process, old school thought process of mine, but it holds true. Okay. So as a result, this sponsorship or the captainship of technology has to come from the board or the business leader. Okay. I think that then only it will percolate to the level where it should.
Very interesting.
Otherwise, things get killed at the first conversation.
Sure, I agree. So, Vivek, my last question to you, and this is on your being a member of the CII Leadership Committee on Supply Chain.
Sure.
Tell me a little more about what you do here and what are some of your objectives.
Okay. So I have always been, Ashutosh, I have always been watching very, very closely on government's increased participation, increased recognition and engagement with the logistics and supply chain sector in the country. Okay, it started happening just a few years ago. Okay, for example, starting from recognizing logistics as one of the infrastructure sector, to creating a separate department in the Ministry of Commerce. Right. Recently, the government, started talking about the multimodal logistics parks. In fact, a couple of years ago, right? And on the other hand, I was anyway speaking very actively on public forums, giving interviews to magazines on business and supply chain and on how see supply chain unfolding in the country. So as a result, I was approached by the people in CII that if I can be a member there on the leadership committee. So what this leadership committee does, Ashutosh, is that I first of all saw it as an opportunity, first of all, to learn how government policy making works in participation industry. I had no clue of that. Okay, so I thought, I have been a corporate citizen. Let me become an Indian citizen also, a good Indian citizen, to see if I can do a minor bit towards building supply chain in the country. Now, what we are doing is we are working in a very structured manner. In fact, this leadership team with in partnership with the government, we have identified 6-7 very, very strong projects where we are working with the government of India. The government of India is putting together what is called a Supply Chain India Vision 2030 for the country. Okay, under that vision, there will be a lot of few very, very pointed achievables. For example, I personally chose myself to be on the skill development project. That's my favorite area. For example, bringing gender diversity to supply chain. Talking about blue collar and white collar jobs separately, right? So I think this has opened up a very interesting area for me to, number one, contribute, and number two, interact with the other captains of the country in supply chain. I think I am finding it very interesting. I'm really enjoying it.
Fascinating. Vivek, on that note, we've run out of time now, but I wanted to thank you. I'm so fascinated by your incredible journey in your multiple interests. And how well you seem to be challenging yourself and achieving everything that you're doing. Thank you again for sharing so much of what you're doing with me. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It has been a pleasure talking to you. I hope our audiences find our conversation interesting.
I'm sure they will. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called you.